It is a poem, Daffodils, by William Wordsworth, who is a romantic poet. In fact, William Wordsworth, along with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, um, was a founder of the Romantic movement in English poetry. The poem Daffodils is also titled I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud. So, the poet is taking a walk in his native Lake District of England. The Lake District is so named because there are a number of lakes in that place, and the poet was taking a walk, a solitary walk, among the hills and mountains and lakes of his native place. And he says, I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills. So, just as a majestic cloud floats in the sky and it is solitary, the poet felt as lonely as a cloud in the sky. He was wandering among the hills and valleys and the mountains of his native place, and he was alone. So he was as lonely as a cloud that floats in the high sky over the vales. The vales are the valleys and the hills. And as he's walking and feeling solitary and without any company, he says, all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. So suddenly, maybe as he turned around the path, he came upon a crowd or a host of golden daffodil flowers. So daffodils are yellow-colored flowers, and they're very pretty or attractive. And he says that the daffodils were like a crowd. Crowd, the word crowd is used to describe people. So he is personifying the daffodils. He calls them a crowd of daffodils. And he also uses the word host. A host is a person who invites people to a party. So the flowers seem to be inviting him to a party. And the poet says the daffodils, they were growing beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. So the flowers were growing by the side of a lake, and they were growing under the trees, beneath the trees, and they were fluttering and they seemed to be dancing in the breeze. So they were swaying to and fro as the wind blew. The poet, next in the second stanza, describes the number of daffodils that he saw. And he says, they were growing as continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way. The Milky Way is our own galaxy, the galaxy in which the Earth is situated. So, the daffodils were so numerous that they seemed to be as many as the stars that shine and twinkle in our own galaxy. They stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. So the daffodils were growing so luxuriantly that they stretched in a never-ending line. They seemed to be growing as far as the horizon along the margin of a bay. A bay is a short indentation in a shore of a body of water, and along the margin or along the shore of this bay, the daffodils grew in what seemed to be in a never-ending line. The poet next uses a hyperbole. A hyperbole is a figure of speech which uses an exaggeration. So he says that he saw 10,000 at a single glance tossing their heads in sprightly dance. So, in a single glance of the eye, the poet says he saw 10,000 daffodil flowers growing, and they were tossing their heads, they were moving their heads to and fro in what seemed to be a sprightly or a lively dance. So, here also, the poet personifies the daffodils. He says they seem to be in a dance, they seem to be dancing lively, in a lively way. In the third stanza, the poet says, the waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. So he says that the waves of the lake beside the daffodils also danced, but they, that is the daffodils, outdid the sparkling or the shining waves in glee or happiness. The daffodils seemed to be much happier than the waves of the water in the lake. And when he saw this sight of the golden flowers moving and fluttering and dancing in the breeze, he says a poet could not help being gay. Gay means happy. He could not help being happy in such a jocund or a jolly company. So he seems to be invited to a party in which the partygoers are dancing and tossing their heads and laughing and smiling and gleeful and who are happy. They're full of glee or happiness. So he too becomes, the happiness is contagious, so he too becomes happy. So the poet says, I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. So the poet is lost in the sight of the daffodils, and he says he gazed and continued to gaze. But at that moment, he couldn't imagine what wealth this sight of the daffodils had brought for him. So he says, for oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. So the poet says that later, when he is lying on his couch in his room, and when he's lying on his sofa or couch, often what happens is that he'll be in a pensive or a thoughtful mood and his mind will be vacant. And when he's in when such a feeling of emptiness steals over him, he says he remembers the sight of the daffodils, which flash upon that inward eye. The inward eye is the eye of the imagination. He remembers the daffodils and he describes the eye of the imagination, the inward eye, as the bliss of solitude. So he enjoys the bliss when he is meditating or when he is remembering the sight of the daffodils in solitude. And then his mood undergoes a change and he says, then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. So we remembers this sight of the daffodils dancing happily by the side of the lake, his heart fills with pleasure and dances as the daffodils were dancing when he saw them. So his mood undergoes a change whenever he remembers the sight of the golden yellow daffodils. So William Wordsworth was known as the high priest of nature. So a priest is one who worships, and William Wordsworth was known as the high priest, or the one who worships nature the most. So this poem is included in many anthologies of university English courses, and it was also included in the 2001-2002 textbook of English for second PU in Karnataka state. So this is the poem Daffodils by the romantic poet William Wordsworth. Thank you.